Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. I wanted to go over a Twitter exchange I saw today that I thought was interesting. It was between Matt Walsh and Megyn Kelly, and they basically threw, a few daggers at each other, arguing over whether or not, it's fair for men to be held to a masculine standard or a traditional masculine standard when women are not, traditionally feminine. And it was interesting to me because Matt Walsh is generally on the side of advocating for traditional conservative values. He, will say in his videos, he'll tell men that you should get married, even though he acknowledges that family law isn't fair, especially for men. But, at the same time, he's vehemently against red pill. He pretty much says it's exactly the same thing as feminism and that it's, toxic and poison and all that stuff. So seeing his tweets today were kind of interesting, but what kicked it off was this video of a woman explaining a date that she went on with a traditional man. So let's watch the video, then we'll go over all the tweets and see what each party had to say.
Guys, I went on a date this week and I felt the feminism leaving my body. I live on the east side of LA, and if you don't know what that means, it's sort of like the artsier part of LA, It's people say it's like Brooklyn and New York. So I go on dates with a lot of men and women who, live over here. There's always a negotiation about who pays, and that's great. I like to pay for people, all that. But what I will say is that I sort of fell into going on a date with the most guy's guy I've ever been on a date with. And he's from West, Santa Monica. He's a bro, right? A guy's guy is usually not my type. I cannot remember the last time that I went on a date with a straight bros bro, you know what I'm saying? But it befell me. It befell me in an organic fashion. So I'm on this date with this guy, and the thing about a guy's guy is he's putting his card down. He's paying for everything. And I really it sort of activated something feral in me. I'm not gonna lie. We went to another bar, and he was gonna go to the bathroom. So I was getting prepared to pay for our drinks because he's been paying all night. Of course I'm gonna pay for the next round. But as he's going to leave for the bathroom, he turns to me and he hands me his credit card. And he goes, "Here's my card. Get us whatever." It might be time for me to get away from all these, liberal snowflakes on the east side.
Okay, so that was the video that set everything off. And I think the key points, or at least what drew their attention to it, was in the beginning when she said she felt like the feminism just leaving her. And basically she just discusses a date that she went on where the man was essentially acting chivalrous. He was being more traditional. And she talks about how she was actually attracted to that and how she liked it. Whether or not you really believe her, if the feminism just whooshed out of there, maybe in the moment. So Matt Walsh chimes in and he says she's impressed that the guy paid, which is fine. Women are naturally attracted to providers, but if she likes this aspect of traditional masculinity, she has to accept the rest of it and be willing to play her part and be traditionally feminine. That's where things usually break down for feminists. And, he starts talking about roles. I can see what he's saying. I think if he means they did the whole thing and got married, would she continue to be traditionally feminine so long as this guy was chivalrous? Or is she really a feminist and she just likes getting her meals paid for? So Matt Walsh says this, and, it gets a bunch of comments. But one notable reaction was from Megyn Kelly. Megyn chimes in and says, actually, no, she doesn't. She can find a man who pays and also gets completely hot for a working wife, who doesn't cook or behave like any sort of traditional wife. So that's her response to Matt. This goes on, and I think it's interesting because it reveals, a rift within the conservatives, or, what you'd call the tradcons themselves. I just reacted to a video from It's Complicated channel, and it was called Undercover Feminists. And it was interesting because he went into a place where there's a bunch of country folks, cowboys and cowgirls and people who are tradcons. And he asked them questions about is it fair to expect a man to be held to a traditional standard if women are no longer expected to be held to theirs? The answers were interesting, but most of them basically said that we like a man to be chivalrous even though we can do all of this for ourselves. So they were all very independent, and it was kind of revealed that they want these traditional things from men. However, they don't want to be traditional themselves, hence undercover feminist.
If women are independent and can do it on their own, why do they still want a man to take care of them?
Because it still feels nice to feel like a feminine girl, be protected, be taken care of.
It just feels good. Like you want someone there like to protect you and like to even though like I'm very independent, like I want a man that I know like will get in front of a train for me. Like I can defend myself, but
do women want to be independent while also being provided for? And if so, who's more delusional in their wants?
I believe yes, and probably the women are a little delusional, but that's just part of our charm, our spark, our flavor.
So seeing Megyn Kelly say something like this, she's in effect kind of revealing that she's not really traditional herself because she is a feminist. So Matt Walsh sees this and he responds. He says, why should the man play the traditionally masculine role of paying for the meals if the woman is not going to play the traditionally feminine role in return? This is essentially the whole red pill argument summed up, or manosphere, whoever you want to say. But that side of the internet is basically complaining about that and are kind of collectively deciding that they're going to step out from the traditional masculine role in order to do whatever they want in response to feminism, which has basically convinced women to step out of their traditional role. He also says this shouldn't even be controversial. A woman who accepts gender roles when she can get a free meal out of it, but then rejects them in every other context, is being self-centered and inconsistent, and that's to put it gently. So Megyn Kelly sees this and she responds, it's not about role-playing. It's about who you are and what attracts you. The message that in order to get a man who wants to take care of you, you have to be a trad wife is not true. Some guys want the fire and excitement of a working wife. Trust me, we bring plenty to the table that would be very appealing to many, not all men, and lots of those men would still want to take care of us, protect us, and marry us. It's awesome. Honestly, I see that and I'm like, okay, you know, like, yeah, a working woman can find a man who wants to do all of those things. Whether or not he should take that deal is debated. Some people might call him a simp, you know. Others might call him it's the traditionally good man. But what we're seeing from this tweet is that she is basically saying that a woman can not act traditional and still find a traditional man who wants to take care of her. So Matt Walsh responds. He says, I never said anything about trad wife. I don't even know what that means anymore. What I'm saying is that the argument for men paying for the date is grounded entirely in traditional gender roles. It is not consistent, not fair, and not honest for a woman to embrace that one single aspect of gender roles while rejecting the rest in principle. And again, it's very similar to what the red pill guys say. They basically say that in modern times, you know, especially now that women, you know, have equal rights, feminism, all these things, that women kind of have their cake and eat it too, and they pick when they want traditional, but when they don't want traditional, they do something else. However, men are essentially stuck being traditional, whether it's reinforced by family law and basically societal expectations. Matt Walsh then goes on to say, I said that a woman should not expect a man to play the traditional masculine role of paying for meals if the woman is not willing to play the traditional feminine role herself. She should not pick and choose the one aspect of gender roles where she gets free stuff. This statement is being treated as controversial and outrageous, even by some on the right, which shows why many men have given up hope in our culture. What are they supposed to do? Any suggestion that women also have responsibilities in a relationship is greeted with abject horror. They're supposed to simply accept the double standard and submit to it without complaint. It's insane. It's evil. I read that right there, and to me, this is Matt Walsh kind of siding almost a little bit more with what red pillars have to say. However, you know, he is a tradcon, and I think he's not all the way there. Like, he's not red pilled, or he would not admit to being red pilled because he's kind of stuck between, you know, a rock and a hard place. On the one sense here, he's got his religious values, which preach a certain thing, and that's what he lives by, and that's what he preaches. So when it comes to men and women's behavior, that's what he's going to stick with. On the other hand, you have his dissatisfaction with feminism, and he's trying to figure out, how do we deal with this? Because a lot of men are deciding to just not play the game. As he acknowledges these points, that it's insane, it's evil to expect men to be held to a traditional standard when women aren't, what is his prescription going to be? He can't just say, hey, men, start living a life of sin, have sex outside of marriage. It's just not going to work for him. Matt went on to say, what we learned from the backlash against me today is that plenty of people really do believe that women should be able to have both feminism and chivalry with no compromise between the two and no additional responsibilities of any kind. This is childish, magical thinking, fueled by unbridled narcissism. Embarrassing. Matt is admitting, you know, that men are in a hard place. It seems like Matt is almost starting to get it. You know, he's almost starting to see how the red pillars view the situation. It's just that he needs to accept that the world that is the traditional world is no longer here. And I think the wall that's kind of blocking the tradcons, or their stumbling block, is that they have convinced themselves, you know, ostrich, you know, head in the ground style, that there's still this traditional world where traditionalism can be practiced genuinely. And I think they haven't really accepted that the world we live in now is not traditional at all. Too many things have changed. Technology has changed. That's given women, you know, more control over their bodies, from birth control, all these kinds of things. They have rights. They can leave a marriage now if they feel like they don't want to be there, regardless of if there's injury to any other spouse or not. And there's just all these changes that have happened. So on the one sense, Matt Walsh is going to say, get married anyways, even though he knows it's a bad idea, or he's going to preach traditionalism and, you know, the values of his religious upbringing and the religion that he practices. But on the other hand, he has to admit that if he's not able to change the laws in a way that's more traditional, in other words, taking away the rights of women and replacing the laws with those that were more like how it was before women's liberation, then all the stuff he's preaching is just not going to work. However, he doesn't make that conclusion. This is where Rollo chimes in. Until tradcons address the fact that women expect 100% responsibility from men, but afford them 0% authority, they will never reestablish conventional masculinity. Welcome to the red pill, Matt. And, you know, it is a good point. You know, he's right about that. Men do not have true authority in their own homes. Men have all the responsibility to protect, provide, but on the other hand, they have none of the authority, you know, in order to say and be able to lay down what values your family is going to live by. And that's been essentially taken away from them. And if a man tries that, you know, he's going to find himself in court very, very fast. It didn't stop there. A lot of other red pill creators had something to say. Let's go and just see what they had to chime in with. Joker from Better Bachelor. I really like his channel. This is why I say men's content and red pill conversation matters, and why the government and media want it off the internet. I did not have Matt Walsh and Megyn Kelly debating this stuff on my bingo card. It's very mainstream now. It's interesting because, you know, Joker put out a video the last time Matt Walsh made a video about the red pill and what he thought about it. Matt had very scathing critiques for the red pill back then. And now it's looking like, you know, Matt's understanding what the problem is. Because back then, you know, you can say, well, you know, you just picked the right women. But when he's confronted with other conservative women like Megyn Kelly, you know, and people who are supposed to be tradcons, who are essentially acting as undercover feminists, women who will cosplay the role, so to speak, but then when it really matters, actually not really be traditional and not behave that way and say, no, that's not how it works. Matt being confronted with that, it shows this rift within the conservatives themselves, that there is not an agreement between the men and the women there. And it's not like they can just sit here and shame the blue-haired feminists because the women that are on their side aren't really playing ball the way they want them to. So when they give advice about, hey, just picking the right woman, it starts to fall flat a little bit because, well, once they take their mask off, they're just like any other woman out here in the Western modern world. We also had Pearl weigh in. Let's see what she had to say. If working wives bring so much to their husbands, can you list what exactly they bring that men care about? Ultimately, what I'd like to hear is, if you're going to live that way, if the woman technically can provide for herself and she enters into a marriage relationship with the man and she's going to continue to work, then she should bring some of that provider ability into the relationship with her. However, Pearl specifically says that men care about, and the red pill argument is always that men don't care about a woman's career. However, on the other hand, you never really hear a woman lead with, hey, you know, I got this great career. I got this great nest egg. I'm just looking for a man that can match mine, and we can both put, you know, our $100,000 nest egg and make it $200,000 and put it down on a house, and let's get our lives started. Let's just contribute. You know, maybe we can't protect ourselves because we're women and we're not as strong as men in that way, even though, you know, guns exist and stuff like that. But let's just say that's the case, and men still have to do that. The provider part of this shouldn't really be debated upon, especially if women are in the workforce. Okay, and beyond that, we also had Whatever podcast chime in on this. I'm pretty sure this is Brian, the host. Let's see what he had to say. Here's Brian. Feminism, equality until the check comes. And back to Rollo. Wanting femininity in a woman is a hostage negotiation in 21st century marriage. So this was all interesting. You know, Matt kind of put himself in this corner where he was then fighting with other conservatives. And it's like, wow, this is really interesting. Is Matt Walsh going to change his mind? Well, he put out a 9-minute video on his Twitter, and I watched it. And honestly, it seemed like he did everything he could to not acknowledge the fact. He kind of didn't mention anything about his spat here back and forth with Megyn Kelly. He just talked about the video, and he basically said, well, men and women are biologically, you know, programmed to want the traditional roles.
And indeed, it is in just about every imaginable way. Now, there's nothing wrong with a woman feeling impressed by and attracted to a man who can foot the bill without complaint. A man who appears to be financially stable and a good provider. I mean, this is raw biological programming. Women are naturally attracted to providers. They should be. It's healthy and good. If you're a woman, of course, you don't want a man who financially depends on you or asks you to go 50-50 on everything.
To be honest, I disagree with him there when he says that it's our biological inclination to want these things. And the reason is because he's a traditional conservative, which relies pretty heavily on religious values. And religion has tried very hard to come up with, you know, prescriptions for how you should live your life, and all these different divinely inspired things, which essentially all boils down to, do not let your biological instincts drive your actions in the world. In fact, you should deny those in favor of a greater spiritual satisfaction, which is not biological. So him appealing to biology is probably not the best thing for him, and he should probably just stick with the TradCon way of appealing to God and religion. Because if we're all left to our own devices biologically, which is the case now, that's how you get promiscuity and porn addiction. Those literally exploit our biological needs and what we are going to do solely biologically. And it's because our situation environmentally has changed. You know, we have birth control, all these other things that have given women an ability to go more into their natural biological inclination to be promiscuous because they're able to mitigate the consequences of that. And for both men and women, ironically. So it's not like, oh, you just suddenly are in line with religious ideals because you're following your biology. But he did say some things that I did agree with.
Staying in the realm of meals here for a second. You can think of it this way. You like how it feels when he pays for your dinner at a restaurant. Okay? But how would it feel if you made him dinner at home?
I like this point because that's the opposite side of the traditional role. And what we saw in Megyn Kelly's tweet is that she said that, you know, a woman who works and is independent and doesn't want to cook, she specifically said cook, can find a man to provide and take care of her and all these things. And that is the other side of chivalry. You know, if when you guys are outside of the house, you're going to pay, you know, you're going to open the doors, you're going to make sure she gets home safe, and you're going to do all those traditionally masculine things. But then when you guys are back inside the house, is she going to do all the traditionally feminine things, you know? Is she going to cook for you, you know, make you a cup of tea, pick up your plate, and take it back to the kitchen and all these things? Those are those sort of charming feminine things that men do notice and appreciate from a woman. However, in Megyn Kelly's world, no, she doesn't have to do any of those. And it shouldn't be expected, even though it's expected for the man to pay.
If the thought of him paying for dinner makes you all warm and fuzzy, but the thought of you preparing him a plate fills you with feminist rage, well, then the feminism really hasn't left your body at all. Like, in that case, you're just cheap, but you're still a feminist. Now, is that the case with this particular woman? I have no idea. I'm not saying it is. I don't know. I hope it's not. I just know that there are plenty of feminists out there who are feminists all the time, except when the bill comes. And that really isn't a sign of progress. If anything, those feminists are the worst ones of all because they don't even have the courage of their own convictions.
And you know who mostly embodies feminism in that way? It's not the blue-haired feminisms on the liberal progressive side of things. It's the women on the conservative side who pick and choose when to be feminist and when not to be feminist. And that's what screws guys over. You know, men aren't getting into marriages with the blue-haired feminists and being surprised if they get divorced and lose, you know, a lot of the stuff that they brought to the marriage and worked for. That woman is at least honest about who she is. The women that these men who are playing into the traditional role are marrying are the traditionally conservative women who cosplay and profess to be traditional when they're in fact an undercover feminist. The rest of this video, it's not like he has this realization where he's like, you know what? Women aren't in their traditional standard anymore and they're not going back. I get the feeling, at least, you know, he doesn't say it explicitly, that he believes that going back to traditional roles is the only way that we can fix this. But like I said earlier, the problem is he going to then also take away rights from women and set us back into a truly traditional world? And the answer is no. I mean, Pandora's box is open. You know, we're not getting rid of cheap and accessible birth control and all this kind of stuff. They've lost the abortion fight. Basically, all the consequences that come out of promiscuity can be mitigated in some form or another, even through the child support system or the welfare state itself, which provides for them. As I continue to watch Matt, you know, what I notice from his content is that, you know, he espouses the traditional conservative values. But one of my biggest criticisms about Matt Walsh and a lot of the traditional conservatives, especially the ones who tell men you need to be more traditional, regardless of if the women are held to account or not, is that they never really fight for what's unfair towards men. You know, I don't see Matt Walsh trying to do anything to bring awareness for paternity fraud or asking the tough questions about changing some of the laws that affect men to where they get stuck having to pay child support for a full 18 years after they find out a kid's not biologically theirs, you know, and they had taken paternity through a marriage and the kid's 3 now and there's nothing you can do at that point. It's yours. Matt has nothing to say about that. Matt doesn't talk about custody. Men do not have custody in the same way that women do. Women typically get the custody. And the argument is, well, men don't fight for it. Typically, men in that situation are already paying so much to fight the divorce. They're already paying child support, alimony, probably keeping the rest of the bills paid, especially when you have children in the situation, that there isn't a lot of money left over to fight a custody case and to focus on that, because you're already paying all this other stuff. So I think custody should be taxpayer funded in the same way that child support's taxpayer funded. But, you know, we don't hear Matt Walsh talking about this. I think if Matt Walsh or the traditionally conservative people really wanted to help, what they would have to do first is accept that the world is no longer traditional, and that the most they can do to kind of veer us back towards traditional living, or at least giving people an incentive to want to be traditional, is to help mitigate the risks for men, and not even just men, but whoever takes on that traditionally masculine provider role. Could be some women nowadays. I've seen divorces like that. I did work at a child support agency for 5 years. I've read thousands of divorce orders that crossed my desk as I had to work one-on-one with these people, and sometimes it was women paying. People like Matt Walsh aren't doing anything to help overhaul the laws so that we can incentivize people to want to sign the marriage contract, to incentivize family creation. And they're not doing that because they have their heads stuck in the ground like an ostrich, because they don't want to accept that their world already got obliterated, 60, 50 years ago. They just still haven't accepted it yet. Matt Walsh seemed like he came pretty close to that realization today. He didn't make it all the way, but I'm going to continue to monitor the situation and see if we can get him, all the way over there. Anyways, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think down below, and we'll see you on the next one.